Jacob's story begins in tension. Even before he's born, he's wrestling with his brother Esau. He enters the world gripping his brother's heel and grows into a man who is always reaching for more, sometimes through persistence, sometimes through opportunity, taken at the expense of others. He bargains for his brother's birthright. He deceives his father for a blessing. And when he flees for his life, he meets his match in Laban, a father in law whose deception matches his own. Laban uses him, cheats him, and eventually turns his sons against him. Jacob's safety is once again on the line. But in every place where Jacob could have been destroyed, God steps in. At Bethel, God shows him a ladder stretching to heaven, a reminder that the promise made to Abraham and Isaac is now his. In Haran, God blesses him with a family and provision despite Laban's schemes. At Peniel, God meets him face to face, wrestling him into surrender and giving him a new name, Israel. Jacob's life reminds us that God's covenant isn't fragile. It survives our flaws, our enemies, and even our own stubbornness. And it shows us something more. Sometimes the greatest blessing comes not when we win the fight, but when we finally let God have the victory. Jacob, opportunist nature shows early in life. Esau, the firstborn, comes in from hunting one day, exhausted and hungry. Jacob sees his moment. The stew is ready. The price? Esau's birthright. The inheritance and spiritual leadership that belonged to the eldest son. Esau agrees, trading away something eternal for something temporary. Later, with his mother Rebekah's help, Jacob disguised himself as Esau to deceive his aging, nearly blind father Isaac. He steals the blessing meant for his brother, a move that ignites deep family conflict and forces Jacob to flee for his life. Jacob's actions were far from righteous, yet the blessings he received was part of God's plan all along. In Genesis chapter 25, verse 23, God had already told Rebekah, the older will serve the younger. Jacob's manipulation didn't make God's promise true. It was true before Jacob ever schemed, but it shows that even when our methods are wrong, God's ultimate purpose cannot be overturned. Then and now, how often do we try to help God fulfill his promises by taking matters into our own hands? Jacob's story reminds us that God doesn't need our shortcuts, and our impatience can create unnecessary pain. Trusting his timing means believing that he will open the right door without us forcing it. Jacob arrives in Haran, weary from travel, running for his life. At a well, he meets Rachel, Laban's beautiful daughter, and it's love at first sight. Jacob agrees to work 7 years for her hand in marriage. Those years fly by, but on wedding night, Laban pulls a shocking trick. He sends Leah, the older sister, into the tent instead of Rachel. In the darkness, Jacob doesn't realize until morning. Scripture says Leah's eyes were weak, a gentle way of saying she lacked the beauty of her younger sister. Jacob had not dreamed of marrying her, but by Laban's deceit, he was now bound to her. What Jacob saw as betrayal, God saw as a key part of his redemptive plan because through Leah would come many sons, including Judah, the ancestor of Jesus himself. Jacob confronts Laban, but the damage is done. Laban insists it's their custom for the older daughter to marry first. The only way Jacob can have Rachel is to work another 7 years. Jacob agrees, but the trust is broken. This could have been the moment Jacob's story turned bitter. Yet God blessed him abundantly in Haran. Despite Laban's repeated attempts to cheat him, changing his wages 10 times, God made sure Jacob prospered. Genesis chapter 31 verse 12 records God saying, I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. God's eyes were on him the whole time, ensuring that every unfair hand dealt to Jacob was turned into provision. Then and now. Have you ever been wronged by someone in power over you? Laban's deceit shows us that people can plot against us, but God's justice is never blind. Even when it feels like the world has the upper hand, God's favor can make us thrive in hostile places. And like Leah, being overlooked by people doesn't mean you're overlooked by God. He can write you into the center of his greatest story. Years have passed. Jacob now has large flocks, herds, servants, and a growing family. God's blessing is undeniable, but not everyone is happy about it. Laban's sons begin to whisper that Jacob has taken everything that belonged to their father. Envy turns to hostility, and the atmosphere in Haran shifts from tense to dangerous. Laban's attitude changes too. The man who once welcomed Jacob now regards him with suspicion. The same deceit that brought Jacob into Haran now threatens to trap him there forever. And then God speaks. In Genesis chapter 31, verse 3, the Lord says, Go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. God is not just given a direction, he's given a promise of his presence. The timing is divine. Jacob is called to leave just as the opposition reaches its peak. Jacob gathers his wives, Leah and Rachel, and explains the situation. How Laban has deceived him again and again, but God has protected and prospered him. Leah and Rachel, both tired of their father's schemes, agree it's time to go. The danger Jacob faced wasn't just social, it could have turned violent. Laban's sons, angry and embittered, were capable of more than just gossip. But God made the first move, calling Jacob out before harm could come. Even more, when Laban pursued Jacob in anger, God himself appeared to Laban in a dream, warning, "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad." Genesis chapter 31, verse 24. God personally intervened to protect his covenant servant. Sometimes God calls us to leave a place before we feel ready, not because we failed, but because he sees the danger ahead. Opposition may be the very signal that it's time to step into his next chapter for us. And like Jacob, when God says, "I will be with you," that's all the insurance we need to move forward without fear. Maybe for you, it was leaving an abusive relationship before it escalated. Maybe it was walking away from a toxic job where your spirit was being crushed. Or maybe it was uprooting your whole life and moving to a new state for a safer, healthier environment. In the moment, it can feel risky, uncomfortable, and even confusing, but Jacob's story reminds us that when God says go, he's not sending you into uncertainty. He's pulling you out for your protection. And when he promises, "I will be with you," that's not just comfort, it's a guarantee that his presence will go before you and fight for you in the next chapter. Jacob is on his way back to Canaan, but there's one more obstacle still looming in his mind: Esau. The last time they were together, Jacob had stolen his brother's blessing, and Esau had sworn to kill him. Now, word comes that Esau is approaching with 400 men. Jacob, fear kicks in. He divides his people and possession into two camps so that if one is attacked, the other might escape. Then, in an act of both humility and strategy, he sends gifts ahead to Esau. Not a small peace offering, but an overwhelming display of wealth. 200 female goats and 20 male goats. 200 ewes and 20 rams. 30 female camels with their colts. 40 cows and 10 bulls. 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. Each herd is sent ahead with a servant spaced out. So Esau receives wave after wave of blessing before he even sees Jacob. By anyone's standard, Jacob is already abundantly blessed. But in Jacob's heart, this moment isn't about the possessions. It's about survival, reconciliation, and God's protection. That night, Jacob sends his family and everything he owns across the Jabbok River and remains alone. And there, a mysterious man, later revealed to be God himself in human form, wrestles with him until daybreak. This isn't a quick scuffle. It's an all-night desperate struggle. As dawn approaches, the man touches Jacob's hip, wrenching it out of socket. Jacob's in pain, but he won't let go. I will not let you go unless you bless me, he insists. Genesis chapter 32, verse 26. The man responds with a question that pierces deeper than Jacob's inquiry. What is your name? It's more than a question. It's a confrontation with his identity. Jacob means opportunist, deceiver. Saying his name is like confessing his history. But then God gives him a new name, Israel, one who struggles with God and prevails. Jacob's limp will remain, but so will his new identity. Jacob's limp wasn't a mark of weakness. It was a reminder of a divine encounter. He walked into that night as a man shaped by fear, deception, and self-reliance, and walked out as a man transformed by God's presence and promise. Even with all his wealth and possessions, what Jacob really needed was not more stuff. It was God's blessing and the assurance that he could face his brother without fear. Then and now, sometimes God meets us in the struggle, not to overpower us, but to change us. You might have all the signs of blessing in your life, the house, the job, the relationship, but still be wrestling with fear, guilt, or uncertainty. The wrestling can also be about identity, letting go of the labels, habits, and ways of thinking that once defined you, so you can become who God already placed inside you to be. It's the fight to surrender fully to God, to release control, and to let Him lead you into a future that doesn't look like your past. Maybe you've been wrestling with unanswered prayers, deep disappointments, or fears about what's ahead. Like Jacob, there comes a moment when the fight isn't about winning, it's about holding on. Have you ever been in a season where the only prayer you could manage was, God, I'm not letting go until you bless me? That kind of desperation doesn't scare God. It invites Him to rename you, reshape you, and send you limping into your destiny with a testimony you couldn't have gained any other way. The sun is rising as Jacob limps toward the moment he's been dreading for decades. Esau is coming with 400 men. But after the night Jacob just had with God, he's not the same man who left home in fear. Jacob looks up and sees Esau approaching. In a show of humility, he bows to the ground 7 times as he nears his brother. Before he can say a word, Esau runs to him, throws his arms around him, and kisses him. The two brothers weep together. Not the reunion Jacob had feared, but the meeting God had orchestrated. Esau looks around and sees the women and children, and then he notices the waves of livestock Jacob has sent ahead. What's the meaning of all of these? Esau asks. Jacob replies, to find favor in your eyes, my lord. But Esau shakes his head. I already have plenty, my brother. Keep what you have. Jacob insists, please accept the gifts that I have brought to you. For God has been gracious to me, and I have all I need. Eventually, Esau accepts. The two walk together, Two men who had every reason to hate each other, now side by side. This moment wasn't luck. It wasn't time healing all wounds. It was God's mercy softening Esau's heart and preparing the way for Jacob's return. Jacob came ready to fight for survival. God gave him peace instead. Then and now, reconciliation is rarely about who won or who was right. It's about God doing what only He can do, healing hearts, removing the sting of betrayal, and restoring relationships that seem permanently broken. Sometimes the person you're afraid to face isn't your enemy anymore. God's already been working behind the scenes to prepare their heart. And sometimes the peace you're longing for doesn't come from avoiding conflict, but from meeting it head on with humility, honesty, and trust in God's protection. Have you ever had a situation where you dreaded the meeting, expected the worst, and instead walked away in peace? That's the kind of ending God writes, the kind that reminds us He is still in the business of turning enemies into brothers, strangers into friends, and broken stories into testimonies. Jacob's mistakes and God's faithfulness in them. 1. Deceiving his father and stealing the blessing. Genesis chapter 27. Jacob's deception was not a heat of the moment slip. It was premeditated, detailed, and emotionally cold. His elderly father Isaac was blind, frail, and nearing the end of his life. Jacob entered the tent smelling like Esau's clothes, wearing goat skin to mimic Esau's hair, and answering to his brother's name without flinching. It's one thing to lie to a stranger. It's another to stand in front of your dying father, look him in the face, and rob him of the final blessing He intended for someone else. The result: Jacob didn't just gain the blessing, he ignited a murderous rage in Esau, tore apart his family, and was forced into years of exile, sleeping on stones and running from death. God's faithfulness. Before Jacob ever wrapped goat skin around his arms, God had already declared the older will serve the younger. Genesis chapter 25, verse 23. The promise didn't need deceit to come to pass. Jacob's method brought pain, but it could not cancel the covenant. Even in his exile, God met him in a dream at Bethel, promising to stay with him until every word was fulfilled. Takeaway: your sin may detour you, but it cannot delete what God has decreed. Number 2, favoring Rachel over Leah. Genesis chapter 29 through 30. Jacob's love for Rachel was deep and passionate, but it became a blinding favoritism that poisoned his household. Leah was given to him through Laban's deceit, a bride he did not choose. And in Jacob's eyes, she was second best from the very first night. Imagine being a wife in name, but treated as a placeholder until the real wife arrived. The tension exploded into open rivalry, with Rachel and Leah bartering for their husband, presents, and competing in a bitter race for children. This favoritism didn't stop with his wives. Years later, Jacob would repeat the same mistake with his sons, openly favoring Joseph above the others, planting seeds of jealousy that would lead to betrayal and slavery. God's faithfulness. God saw Leah's ache for love and vindication. While Jacob's eyes overlooked her, God's eyes never did. He opened Leah's womb and gave her Reuben, Simon, Levi, and Judah, the last being the direct ancestor of Jesus Christ. Through the unwanted wife came the Savior of the world. Takeaway: God sees the overlooked, and He uses what man deems less than to bring forth what is priceless. Number 3, scheming for wealth with the flocks. Genesis chapter 30, verse 37 through 43, and chapter 31, verse 7 through 12. Jacob's deal with Laban for the speckled and spotted sheep was clever by human standards. Cutting rods, setting them before the animals at mating time, and using selective breeding to ensure the strongest belonged to him. It worked so well that Jacob became immensely wealthy in livestock. But here's what's shocking. Years later, God appears to Jacob in a dream and reveals that it wasn't the sticks. The breeding tricks are Jacob's brilliance that caused his success. God Himself caused the flocks to bear in Jacob's favor because he had seen Laban's deceit and chosen to bless Jacob in spite of it. God's faithfulness. Jacob thought his schemes earned him wealth, but God made it clear, I have seen all that Laban have been doing to you. Genesis chapter 31, verse 12. His provision was not payment for cleverness. It was protection for a covenant heir. Takeaway: sometimes we think we're the architect of our own success, when in reality it's been God all along, shielding, providing, and multiplying behind the scenes. So here's some hidden gold. God protects an enemy's territory. Laban chased Jacob down with every intention to harm him. But before he could lay a hand on him, God appeared in a dream and warned, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. When God's hand is on you, He doesn't just bless you. He intimidates your enemies before they ever reach you. God meets us in the breaking. Jacob's all-night wrestling match wasn't God trying to destroy him. It was God refusing to let him live under the old name any longer. The dislocated hip was not an injury. It was an identity shift. Jacob limped from that day forward, a physical reminder that he could no longer walk the same way after encountering God. God prepares. Jacob sent droves of livestock to Esau to buy his safety, not realizing God had already softened Esau's heart. By the time they met, the gifts were irrelevant. Esau embraced him without a single demand. God had been working on Jacob's fears before Jacob even began his journey. Jacob's life is proof that the God of the covenant is not scared off by human mess. He steps into deception, favoritism, rivalry, fear, and scheming, not to approve it, but to redeem it. Every flaw in Jacob's story became a stage for God's faithfulness. And here's the hope for us. You are not too flawed, too complicated, or too inconsistent for God to use. If He can take a man who deceived his father, divided his family, and limped for the rest of his life and still call him Israel, then He can take you, rename you, and write your life into His story of redemption.